On a blind date, a woman in a wheelchair is humiliated in front of everyone, until someone unexpected changes the course of her life with a gesture no one else dared to make. Elizabeth adjusted the pearl necklace around her neck for the third time in 5 minutes. Her hands trembled slightly, something that never happened even in the most tense meetings with Japanese investors. The Villa Bella restaurant in the heart of Portland buzzed with the typical Friday night chatter. She had arrived 15 minutes before the scheduled time, an obsession with punctuality she had carried since her college days. The wheelchair glided smoothly across the marble floor as she searched for the reserved table. The maitre d', an elegant man with a graying moustache, discreetly guided her to a table near the windows overlooking Rose Street. The movement of the city outside contrasted with the forced tranquility she was trying to maintain. 3 months. It had been 3 months since Maria, her only true friend and the company's marketing director, had suggested this madness. "Beth, you need to get out of that glass bubble," she had said, waving a dating app on her phone screen as if it were a magic wand. "You don't have to tell everything right away. Just her." Elizabeth almost laughed at the irony. Who was she beyond the CEO of Biogenesis, beyond the magazine covers, beyond the woman who had transformed a startup into one of the largest biotechnology companies in North America? Who was Elizabeth beyond the wheelchair that had accompanied her for 5 years? The profile on the app had been a careful composition of half-truths. Biotechnology executive, true. Portland resident, true. Interested in art and literature, true, although she had abandoned brushes and romance novels after the accident. The chosen photo was a bust-up portrait, taken at a company event, where her smile seemed natural and her eyes conveyed confidence. For 3 weeks, she had navigated through empty conversations with men who seemed more interested in impressing than in getting to know her, until Mark Silver's profile appeared. Attorney specializing in business law, graduated from Northwestern, passionate about wines and French literature. The conversations flowed naturally. He asked intelligent questions, commented on the books she mentioned, showed genuine interest in her opinions on bioethics and innovation. "I'd like us to meet in person," he had written in the message the previous afternoon. "I know a discreet and elegant place where we can talk without rushing." Villa Bella was exactly that, discreet, elegant, and frequented by people who valued privacy as much as good food. Elizabeth looked at her phone's clock again. 8:15. Mark was only 5 minutes late, but each passing minute increased her anxiety. Maybe this was really an absurd idea. A woman like her with her condition, trying casual dating as if she were a carefree college student. The waiter approached discreetly. "Would you like to order an appetizer while you wait, ma'am?" "Just water, please," she replied, keeping her voice steady. She didn't want to show nervousness to the restaurant staff. When the waiter walked away, she returned to watching the movement on the street. Couples walked hand in hand, groups of friends laughed loudly entering nearby bars, families with children looked for places to dine. Normal life. Life that she had observed from a distance for so long that she had almost forgotten what it was like to truly participate. The sound of approaching footsteps made her look toward the entrance. A tall man in an impeccable navy blue suit was talking to the maitre d'. Brown hair combed back, erect posture, gold watch on his wrist. It had to be Mark. Her nervousness intensified when the maitre d' pointed in the direction of the table where she sat. Elizabeth took a deep breath and adjusted her posture. First impression was fundamental in any situation, whether a business meeting or a personal encounter. The man walked toward her with a confident smile, but as he approached, she noticed something changing in his expression. The smile faltered. His steps slowed. His eyes, which initially sought her face, dropped to the wheelchair. The change was subtle, almost imperceptible, but Elizabeth had learned to identify every nuance of people's reactions when they first encountered her condition. "Elizabeth." His voice carried a hesitation that didn't exist in the messages they had exchanged. "Yes, that's me." "Mark, I presume." She extended her hand elegantly, maintaining the professional smile she used in important negotiations. He shook her hand quickly, almost like a formal greeting, and sat in the chair across from her. The silence that followed was filled only by the noise of plates and conversations from other tables. "You didn't mention," he began, making a vague gesture toward the wheelchair. I mentioned that I'm an executive, that I like art, that I enjoy good conversation, she replied, keeping a neutral tone. I thought that information was more relevant for a first meeting. His embarrassment was palpable. Mark looked around as if searching for an exit, fiddled with the napkin on the table, adjusted his tie knot. Well, that's important information, don't you think? Important for what, exactly? Her question seemed to irritate him. The embarrassed expression gave way to something harder, more aggressive. For honesty, for example. To not create false expectations. What false expectations? Elizabeth's voice was still controlled, but internally she felt the first cracks in the armor she had built over the years. Mark leaned forward, lowering his voice, but not enough that she couldn't catch every poisonous word. Expectations of a normal date, with a normal woman. You made me waste my time, coming here expecting one thing and finding this. The word "this" hit Elizabeth like a punch to the stomach. She had heard similar comments before, but always from strangers, from people whose opinion didn't matter. Never from someone with whom she had shared intelligent conversations, intimate thoughts, expectations. You're being unfair, she said, still trying to maintain her composure. Unfair? His voice rose slightly, causing some people from nearby tables to look in their direction. Unfair is you not being clear from the beginning. It's bringing me here knowing that I would never... He stopped mid-sentence, but the ending hung in the air between them like a sharp blade. Never get involved with someone like you. Never waste my time with someone incomplete. Never accept carrying that burden. Elizabeth felt her face heat up. Not from shame, but from an old and familiar anger that she thought she had mastered. Memories came like a flood. Her father's words in the hospital after the accident, the polite excuses from former suitors, the pitying looks from colleagues in the first months after her return to the company. Look, you seem to be an interesting woman, Mark continued, now in a tone he probably judged conciliatory, but I have a career and image to maintain. I can't afford the luxury of getting involved with someone who what? Her voice finally came out louder than she intended. Who will complicate things? Who will be a burden? Who will be a weight? The silence that followed was deafening. Conversations from other tables seemed to have stopped. Waiters froze halfway between the kitchens and the tables. The natural movement of the restaurant transformed into a collection of curious and embarrassed looks directed at them. Elizabeth closed her eyes for a moment, trying to control her breathing. When she opened them again, Mark was rising from his chair, adjusting his jacket as if ending an unsuccessful business meeting. Sorry for the misunderstanding, he said, taking his wallet from his jacket's inner pocket. I'll leave some money to cover the water you ordered. It was at that moment that the restaurant door opened and a man entered with determined steps. He wore a faded denim jacket, simple white t-shirt and leather boots marked by time and work. His dark brown hair was slightly disheveled, as if he had run his hand through it while driving. He didn't belong in that elegant environment, but moved with a natural confidence that contrasted with the nervousness of the other patrons. Without hesitation, he walked directly to the table where Elizabeth and Mark were. His dark eyes met hers for an instant, and she saw something she didn't expect. Understanding without pity, firmness without aggression. "Excuse me," said the stranger, positioning himself between Mark and the table. "Is there a problem here?" Mark looked him up and down, clearly irritated by the interruption. "This is none of your business, friend. We are just finishing a conversation." "From the tone of conversation I heard from outside," the man replied, "I'd say it ended long enough ago." His voice was calm, but there was a silent authority that made Mark take a step back. Elizabeth watched the scene with a mixture of surprise and relief. She didn't know this man, didn't know where he had come from. But for the first time in a long time, someone had positioned themselves at her side without her having to ask. "Who do you think you are to interfere in my conversation?" Mark tried to recover his authority, but his voice sounded shriller, less convincing. "Someone who knows how to recognize a gentleman when he sees one," replied the stranger without taking his eyes off the lawyer. And clearly that's not the case here. Mark's embarrassment transformed into public humiliation. He looked around, noticing that all the restaurant's attention was focused on them. He quickly put away his wallet and directed one last angry look at Elizabeth. "You deserve this anyway," he muttered, low enough that only she and the stranger could hear. That's when the man stepped forward. He didn't say anything, just looked Mark in the eyes with an intensity that made the lawyer back away again. Without further words, Mark left the restaurant with hurried steps, leaving behind only the echo of his cruelty and the embarrassed silence of the other patrons. The stranger waited until Mark disappeared through the door before turning to Elizabeth. "Are you okay?" The simplicity of the question, asked without drama or condescension, almost made her cry. She nodded, not trusting her own voice at that moment. "May I?" He pointed to the chair that Mark had occupied. Elizabeth nodded again, and he sat down with natural movements as if this were the most normal thing in the world. There was no rush in his actions, no exaggerated gestures of kindness. "Just normalcy. Ryan," he said, extending his hand. "Elizabeth," she replied, shaking his hand and noticing the calluses that spoke of manual work. "Pleasure to meet you, Elizabeth." And for the first time that night, she smiled genuinely. If this story interests you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and give us a like. Let us know what city you're watching us from. We'll continue. The waiter approached the table with professional discretion, pretending nothing had happened. "Would you like to see the menu?" Ryan looked at Elizabeth with a questioning expression. "If you don't mind the company of a stranger, I'd love to have dinner. I just finished a job and I'm starving." She studied his face for a moment. There was honesty in his dark brown eyes, without any trace of the disguised pity she usually saw in others. "I'm hungry too," she replied, surprising herself with her own spontaneity. "Then let's eat," said Ryan, accepting the menu from the waiter. "But first, I need to be honest with you. I don't usually frequent places like this. I hope you'll help me not make a fool of myself." His confession made her relax her shoulders. "How did you know that I was—" She hesitated, not knowing how to finish the sentence. "I was passing by the sidewalk when I heard the raised voice inside. I looked through the window and saw the scene." Ryan closed the menu and looked at her directly. "My sister has used a wheelchair since she was 15. I've witnessed similar situations a few times." "And do you always invade restaurants to defend strangers?" "Only when it's worth it," he replied with a half-smile that completely transformed his face. Elizabeth felt something stir inside her chest, a sensation she hadn't experienced in a long time. "And how do you know it's worth it?" "By the way you maintained your dignity throughout that ridiculous situation. Anyone would have the right to leave screaming or to humiliate that idiot back. But you stayed there firm without lowering yourself to his level." The waiter returned, and Ryan ordered the daily special without much ceremony. Elizabeth opted for grilled salmon, her usual choice when dining out. When they were alone again, she realized that she no longer felt the weight of curious looks from other tables. Ryan's presence had created a bubble of normalcy around them. "You mentioned your sister," she said, curious to know more about this strange man who had appeared out of nowhere. "Amanda. Motorcycle accident at 15. Today she's 28, a physical therapist, and plays wheelchair basketball for the national team." The pride in his voice was unmistakable. "She always says the accident was the best thing that happened in her life because it forced her to discover who she really was beneath all the expectations of others. She sounds like an amazing person." "She is. And stubborn as a mule, just like you, I imagine." Elizabeth almost choked on her water. "You don't know me." "I know you're an executive, which already requires a considerable dose of stubbornness. I know you chose to come alone to a date in an elegant restaurant, showing that you're not afraid of exposing yourself. And I know you didn't run away when that jerk publicly humiliated you." Ryan leaned slightly forward. "That tells me a lot about who you are." The conversation flowed with surprising naturalness. Ryan told her about the auto repair shop he managed in the Riverside neighborhood, inherited from his father, who had passed away 3 years ago. He spoke passionately about engines, about the satisfaction of giving new life to vehicles that others considered lost. Elizabeth found herself talking about the company, about the challenges of leading a team of brilliant scientists, about the excitement of developing technologies that could save lives. "Biotechnology," he repeated, impressed. "So you work with creating medicines?" "Among other things. We develop gene therapies, medical equipment, research treatments for rare diseases." She paused, conscious that she might be sounding pedantic. "And you, did you always want to be a mechanic?" "Actually, I studied mechanical engineering at MIT. I graduated, worked for 2 years at a multinational, I earned well, had a promising future ahead. Ryan thoughtfully stirred his food. But when my father got sick, I went back to take care of the shop temporarily. I ended up discovering that I preferred working with my hands, solving real problems, seeing the immediate result of my work. Don't you miss corporate life? No, there I was, just another engineer in an ocean of engineers. Here, I'm Ryan from the repair shop. I know my customers by name, know the history of every car I fix, and part of the community. He smiled. And you? Did you always want to be a CEO? Elizabeth hesitated. It was a simple question, but the answer involved layers of pain and determination that she rarely shared. I always liked sciences. I wanted to be a researcher, stay in the laboratory discovering cures for diseases. But circumstances led me to administration. What kind of circumstances? Complex ones, she replied, signaling that she wasn't ready to delve deeper into the subject. Ryan respected the boundary without insisting. And can you still research? Sometimes. When I'm not in meetings or dealing with investors, she smiled. Actually, I have some personal projects in progress. I research neural regeneration. Must be fascinating. It is. Complex, frustrating sometimes, but fascinating. Dinner came to an end almost without them noticing. 2 hours had passed as if they were minutes. Ryan insisted on splitting the bill, despite Elizabeth's polite protests. She wasn't used to men who weren't intimidated by her evident financial success. At the restaurant's exit, she realized that she didn't want the night to end. Where did you park? Actually, I came by motorcycle. I was making a delivery here downtown, and decided to have dinner before heading home. Elizabeth looked at the BMW R1250 parked on the street. Her robust bike, well maintained but clearly used for work. Is it yours? My work companion. I use it for quick deliveries and to escape traffic. Ryan followed her gaze. I imagine you have an adapted car. I do. A Volvo with hand controls. She paused. I hadn't driven in 5 years until I had this car adapted last year. What made you start driving again? Independence. I got tired of depending on a driver for everything. I wanted to be able to leave when I wanted, go where I wanted, without having to answer to anyone. The sincerity of the response surprised her. She rarely spoke so openly about her limitations. Amanda says the same thing. She has an adapted Honda Civic that's her pride and joy. They walked slowly along the sidewalk, in no rush to say goodbye. The night was pleasant, with the mild temperature typical of Portland in early autumn. The lights from commercial buildings created a welcoming urban setting. Can I ask you an indiscreet question? Ryan said suddenly. You can ask. I'll decide if I answer. Why were you on that date? A woman like you shouldn't have difficulties meeting interesting people. Elizabeth laughed, but there was bitterness in the sound. You'd be surprised. Most men who approach me are interested in status, contacts, or money. Those who are genuinely interested usually get scared off by the wheelchair. And the few who don't get scared. Well, you saw the kind of reaction I can provoke. Mark was an idiot. Not all men are like that. Maybe not. But the ones I've met so far have made it clear that I come with complications. Ryan stopped walking and positioned himself in front of her. Can I be honest? You're one of the most impressive people I've ever met. Intelligent, determined, successful, beautiful. If some men can't see that because of a wheelchair, the problem is with them, not with you. His words hit her with an unexpected intensity. For years she hadn't heard something like this, said with such sincerity. You barely know me. I know enough to know that I'd like to know more. Elizabeth's heart raced. Ryan, I'm not asking for anything. I'm just saying that if you want to have coffee sometime or talk or show me how that neural regeneration research works, I'd love that. She studied his face, looking for signs of pity or forced interest. She found only honesty and a genuine curiosity that touched her deeply. I would like that, she finally admitted. Then give me your number. As they exchanged contacts, Elizabeth wondered when was the last time she had felt genuinely interested in getting to know someone better. Not out of social obligation or professional convenience, but out of real desire. Take care, Elizabeth, said Ryan, putting on his helmet. And don't let idiots like that make you doubt your worth. She watched him leave, the sound of the motorcycle getting lost in the night movement of the city. Alone on the sidewalk, she realized she was smiling. For the first time in months, the prospect of the coming days seemed interesting. When she arrived home in the penthouse with a panoramic view of Portland, Elizabeth went to her office and opened her laptop. There were emails waiting, reports to review, decisions to make. But before diving into work, she did something she hadn't done in a long time. She took her phone and carefully saved Ryan's contact, adding a note, "The man who reminded me that I am still a woman." 3 days passed before Elizabeth found the courage to send the first message. She was in her office on the top floor of Biogenesis, reviewing financial reports, when she caught herself thinking about Ryan for the 5th time that day. The memory of his smile, of the naturalness with which he had treated her, interrupted her concentration in a disconcerting way. Finally, between one meeting and another, she typed, "How's your week going? Elizabeth from the restaurant." The response came in less than 10 minutes. "Hi, Elizabeth from the restaurant. Busy week, but good. The engine of a 1978 VW bus that doesn't want to work is giving me trouble. And you? How's the neural regeneration research going?" The fact that he had remembered what she had mentioned about her work surprised her positively. In the following days, they established a casual routine of messages. He told her about the cars he repaired, she about the challenges of leading a team of scientists. The conversations were light, unpretentious, and Elizabeth found herself awaiting his messages with an expectation she hadn't felt in years. A week after the meeting at Villa Bella, Elizabeth was leaving a particularly tense meeting with investors when she decided to do something impulsive. Instead of going straight home, she drove to Riverside. Finding Ryan's repair shop was easier than she imagined. Just follow the sound of tools and the smell of diesel oil. Santos Auto Repair occupied an old warehouse on Maple Street, with a simple facade painted in faded blue. Cars in different stages of repair occupied the inner yard, and the sound of a radio playing blues echoed through the environment. Elizabeth parked on the street and spent a few minutes observing the movement. Ryan was bent over the engine of a white Ford, sleeves rolled up, sweat on his forehead despite the cool weather. He was chatting animatedly with an elderly gray-haired man who seemed to be the car's owner. The naturalness of the interaction, the way Ryan explained the problem using simple terms, contrasted with the corporate environment she was accustomed to. "Can I help you?" A young woman in blue overalls and a ponytail approached the car window. "I'm looking for Ryan," said Elizabeth, a little unsure about having gone there. "Ryan?" "Visitor for you," shouted the woman, and Elizabeth saw Ryan's face light up when he recognized her. "Elizabeth, what a nice surprise." He approached the car, cleaning his hands on a towel. "Everything okay? Did something happen?" "No, nothing. I was passing by the area and—" She stopped, realizing how fake the lie sounded. "Actually, I had a terrible meeting and decided that I needed to see something real, concrete." "I thought of your shop." His smile widened. "Want to see the place? I can show you what we're doing with that VW bus I mentioned." Elizabeth agreed, and Ryan guided her through the warehouse with evident pride. He introduced her to the employees: Carla, the mechanic who had received her, John, an experienced welder, and Mike, a young apprentice who couldn't have been more than 18. They all greeted her with naturalness, without the curious or embarrassed looks she was accustomed to in professional environments. "This is the famous VW bus," said Ryan, stopping in front of a yellow and white van that looked like it had come from the 70s. "The owner wants to restore it to travel with his family. The engine was completely locked up, but we got it working yesterday. Can I see?" Ryan opened the rear hood and began to explain what they had done, using technical language that revealed his engineering background, but adapted so she could follow. Elizabeth found herself genuinely interested, asking questions about the restoration process, about how they decided which parts could be recovered and which needed to be replaced. "It's like the research you do," Ryan said suddenly. "You try to regenerate damaged neurons, I regenerate engines. Both of us work to give a second chance to something that everyone considered lost." The comparison touched her more deeply than he imagined. "I never thought of it that way. Want to see it running?" Ryan started the VW bus and the engine purred smoothly. The satisfaction smile on his face was contagious, and Elizabeth found herself laughing for the first time in weeks. "Impressive," she said sincerely. "It must be gratifying to see the immediate result of your work." "Is it different from research?" "Very different. In biotechnology, We work with hypotheses that can take years to be confirmed, sometimes decades. When we finally see positive results, it's exciting, but the path to get there can be frustrating. And you still continue? Because it's worth it. A discovery of ours can help thousands of people, can give hope to those who don't have any. Ryan observed her with an intensity that made her blush slightly. You really believe in what you do? I believe. It's what drives me. Want to get coffee? I know a place nearby that makes the best cinnamon rolls in Portland. The place was a family bakery 2 blocks from the shop, with formica tables and mismatched chairs that had probably been there since the 80s. Mrs. Johnson, the owner, greeted Ryan as if he were family and insisted on personally serving the coffee and still warm cinnamon rolls. You're a frequent customer, observed Elizabeth. I've been coming here since I was little. My father used to bring me for breakfast on Sundays. Ryan stirred his sugar thoughtfully. After he passed away, I kept coming. Mrs. Johnson always asks if I'm eating right, if I need anything. Do you miss him? Very much. He was my best friend besides being my father. He taught me everything about cars, about responsibility, about treating people with dignity regardless of their bank account. He sounds like he was a special man. He was. He always said that honest work dignifies a man, no matter if you're fixing a Volkswagen or running a multinational. Ryan smiled. He would be proud to see me talking with a CEO, and I would be proud to have met a man like him. The conversation flowed naturally for the next 40 minutes. Elizabeth told him about the pressure of leading a company in a predominantly male sector, about the challenges of constantly proving competence. Ryan shared stories from the shop, of customers who became friends, of the satisfaction of solving problems that others considered impossible. When they were preparing to leave, Mrs. Johnson approached the table. Your boyfriend is a lucky man, miss, she said to Elizabeth with a mischievous smile. No, we're not, Elizabeth began to explain, but the older woman had already returned to the counter. The embarrassment lasted only a few seconds. Ryan laughed first and Elizabeth joined him, realizing that she didn't feel offended by the lady's assumption. Want me to walk you to your car? Ryan offered when they left the bakery. No need, it's right here in front. I insist. My mother would kill me if she knew I let a lady go to her car alone. During the short journey, Elizabeth realized how comfortable she felt beside him. There was no tension, no unspoken expectations, just a pleasant company that made the late afternoon less heavy. Thank you for showing me your shop, she said, unlocking the car, and for reminding me that there are still people who do what they do out of passion, not just obligation. Thank you for coming. It was the best end of the afternoon I've had in a long time. They said goodbye with a wave, and Elizabeth drove back to the city centre with a strange feeling in her chest. All the way she found herself smiling for no apparent reason, remembering details of the conversation, the way Ryan explained things with enthusiasm, the affection with which he was treated by the people in the neighbourhood. At home, as she changed from her business suit into comfortable clothes, Elizabeth found herself thinking about how she had spent the afternoon. When was the last time she had spontaneously visited someone? When was the last time she had sat in a simple bakery, eating homemade cinnamon rolls and talking about life? Her phone vibrated with a message from Ryan. I hope the rest of your day was better than the terrible morning meeting. She typed back, it was. Much better. Thank you. Can I confess something? I was happy you showed up at the shop. I was waiting for an excuse to see you again. His honesty disarmed her once more. I wanted to see you too, she replied, surprised by her own frankness. Then let's not wait for another terrible meeting. How about having dinner together one of these days? I promise to choose a less formal place than Villa Bella. Elizabeth hesitated for only a moment before responding. I would love to. That night, for the first time in months, she fell asleep thinking of possibilities instead of problems. And for the first time in years, she woke up the next day eager for what the future might bring, instead of simply determined to face it. If this story interests you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and give us a like. Let us know what city you're watching us from. We'll continue. 3 weeks passed in a routine that Elizabeth never imagined possible. Quick lunches in simple downtown restaurants, long phone conversations after work hours, aimless walks through the streets of Portland on weekends. Ryan had become a constant presence in her thoughts. And she discovered aspects of herself that she had forgotten existed. On Monday morning, Elizabeth arrived at the office with a discreet smile that didn't go unnoticed by Maria, her marketing director and only close confidant. "May I know who is responsible for that face of someone who won the lottery?" asked Maria, entering the executive office without ceremony. "I don't know what you're talking about," replied Elizabeth, pretending to concentrate on the reports on the desk. "Beth, you're humming. You never hum at the office." Maria settled in the chair in front of the desk. "Did something good happen over the weekend?" Elizabeth sighed, knowing it would be pointless to try to hide anything from Maria. The two had known each other since college and had worked together for 7 years. If there was someone who could read her expressions like an open book, it was her. "I met someone," she finally admitted. "Someone interesting?" "Very interesting. And completely different from anyone I've ever been involved with." Maria leaned forward, curious. "Different how?" "He's a mechanic. Has a repair shop in Riverside. Wears worn jeans and doesn't know the difference between a Bordeaux and a Beaujolais. And is that good or bad?" Elizabeth thought for a moment before answering. "It's liberating. With him, I don't need to be the CEO of Biogenesis. Don't need to impress anyone. Don't need to prove my competence in every conversation. I can be just me." "Sounds perfect. What's the problem?" "Who said there's a problem?" "You did. It's in your voice, in the way you looked away when you talked about him." Maria crossed her arms. "Just tell me, Beth." Elizabeth turned her chair to look out the panoramic window that gave a view of the city center. Down below, the morning traffic formed a river of metal and haste. What if he discovers who I really am? What if when he knows about the company, about the assets, about all the pressure that comes with my life, he decides it's too much? He doesn't know about Biogenesis? He knows I work with biotechnology, but he doesn't know I own the company. For him, I'm just any executive. Elizabeth, you'll have to tell him eventually. I know. It's just that it's been so long since someone looked at me and saw just a woman, not a title or a bank account or a wheelchair. Maria stood up and walked to the window, standing beside her friend. "Are you afraid that he'll stay with you for the money or run away from the money?" "Both and neither. It's complicated. Love always is." The word made Elizabeth start. "Who said anything about love?" "You don't need to say it. It's written in every expression of yours since you arrived here today." Before Elizabeth could respond, the secretary announced over the intercom the arrival of Albert Norton, her father and chairman of Biogenesis board. Maria said goodbye quickly, well aware of the dynamics between father and daughter. Albert entered the room with the military posture he had maintained since the days he served in the army, before founding the company. At 65, he was still an imposing man, with well-cut grey hair and an impeccable suit. His presence always made Elizabeth feel like a child being called to the principal's office. "Good morning, Elizabeth. We need to talk." "Good morning, Dad. What happened?" "I received some concerning information." He sat in the chair Maria had occupied, but his posture was much more rigid. "About your recent personal activities." Elizabeth's blood ran cold. "What kind of information?" "About you getting involved with people. Inappropriate for your position." "What do you mean?" Albert removed a folder from his document case and placed it on the desk. Ryan Santos, 32, owner of Santos Auto Repair in the Riverside neighborhood. Graduated in mechanical engineering from MIT, but has been working as a mechanic for 3 years. Elizabeth stared at the folder without touching it, feeling a mixture of anger and violation that left her speechless for a few seconds. "You had Ryan investigated?" "It's my obligation to protect you and protect the company." "Protect from what exactly?" "From people who can take advantage of you, of your condition, of your wealth." Albert opened the folder, revealing photographs and documents. "This man approached you in a suspicious manner, in circumstances too convenient to be coincidence." "Are you insinuating that he planned to meet me?" "I'm saying that men like him know how to identify vulnerable women. Rich and lonely women are easy targets for scammers." The word vulnerable hit Elizabeth like a slap. "Ryan is not a scammer. He doesn't even know who I really am." "Of course he does. Everyone in Portland knows Elizabeth Norton, CEO of Biogenesis. Your photo appears in magazines, you speak at events, participate in television programs. He's never shown interest in my money. That's exactly how these scams work. They make you believe they're interested in you as a person. gain your trust, and then start asking for favors. Loans, investments, opportunities. Elizabeth clenched her fists, trying to control the growing anger. "So you don't know Ryan. You don't know how he is, how he treats me. I know he has nothing to offer you. No future, no growth prospects, no social position compatible with yours. Since when is social position a criterion for me to have a relationship with someone? Since always, Elizabeth. You have responsibilities. To the company, to the employees, to our family. You can't afford the luxury of getting involved with just anyone. Just anyone." Elizabeth's voice rose a few tones. "Ryan is an honest, hard-working man who treats me with respect and affection. It's more than I can say about most of the appropriate men you've tried to introduce me to." Albert sighed, assuming the patronizing tone he used when he thought she was being irrational. "Daughter, I understand that you feel lonely, especially after the accident. It's natural that any male attention seems special. Don't you dare use my wheelchair as justification for your manipulations. I'm not manipulating anything. I'm trying to protect you from inevitable disappointment. Protect or control." The question hung in the air between them. Albert leaned back in his chair, studying his daughter's face with the same calculating expression he used in difficult negotiations. "If you continue with this relationship, you'll have to deal with the consequences." "What consequences?" "The press, the shareholders, the clients. All will question your judgment, your competence to lead the company. Because I'm involved with a mechanic? For getting involved with someone who is clearly interested in taking advantage of you." Elizabeth took the investigation folder and returned it to her father without opening it. "This conversation ends here. Elizabeth, it's over. Dad. And if you investigate Ryan again or try to interfere in my relationship in any way, you'll discover that I can be as determined as you when necessary." Albert stood up, putting the folder away with precise movements. "I hope you don't come to regret this decision." After he left, Elizabeth remained alone in the office, trembling with anger and indignation. She picked up her phone several times to call Ryan, but always gave up before completing the call. How to explain that her father had ordered an investigation on him? How to tell about the real extent of her wealth and position without him thinking she had lied all these days? The afternoon passed in a fog of automatic meetings and decisions made on autopilot. Elizabeth could barely concentrate, divided between anger at her father's behavior and fear of losing Ryan before even having had the chance to discover where that relationship could lead them. At 6 in the evening, when the last employee had left, she was still in the office, looking out the window at the city that gradually lit up. Her phone vibrated with a message from Ryan. "How was your day?" "Mine was full of surprises, some good, others not so much." She typed and deleted several different responses before finally writing, "Also full of surprises. Want to talk in person?" "Sure, where do you want to meet?" "At your shop. I need to show you something." "All right, I'll wait for you here." During the entire journey to Riverside, Elizabeth mentally rehearsed the conversation she would have with Ryan. How to tell him about biogenesis, about her father's investigation, about the fears that had haunted her since she met him. When she arrived at the shop, she found Ryan cleaning the day's tools, preparing to close. He smiled when he saw her, but she noticed there was something different in his expression. "Good thing you came," he said, putting away the last wrench. "I also have some things to tell you." The serious tone in his voice made Elizabeth's heart race. "Ryan, I need to be honest with you about some things." "Me too," he replied, and for the first time since they met, an uncomfortable silence settled between them. Neither of them knew, but that would be the last quiet conversation they would have for a long time. The next few weeks would bring revelations, misunderstandings, and decisions that would test everything they had built together until then. Ryan closed the shop door and invited Elizabeth to sit in the small office at the back of the warehouse. The environment was simple but organized, with an old wooden desk, 2 mismatched chairs, and walls decorated with auto parts, calendars, and family photos. "You." "First," he said, noticing the anxiety on her face. Elizabeth took a deep breath, trying to find the right words. "Ryan, I haven't been completely honest about who I am." "What do you mean?" "When I said I work with biotechnology, I didn't mention that. Well, that I own the company. Biogenesis is mine." Ryan stared at her in silence for a few seconds, processing the information. "Your company. As in, you are the owner. I'm CEO and majority shareholder. I inherited the company from my grandfather and transformed it into what it is today. Biogenesis, he repeated slowly. That company that appears in the newspapers, that develops revolutionary medicines? That one. Ryan leaned back in his chair, running a hand through his hair. Why didn't you tell me before? Because I wanted you to know me as a person, not as a title or a bank account. Because I'm tired of men who are interested in me only for what I can offer materially. And you thought I would be like that? I don't know. I hope not. But I was afraid to find out. The silence that followed was filled only by the distant sound of street traffic. Ryan stood up and walked to the small window that overlooked the shopyard. You know what's the irony of the situation, Elizabeth? He finally said without turning around. I haven't been completely honest with you either. Her heart raced. What do you mean? 2 men approached me this morning. Well-dressed men in an expensive car. They knew my name, knew about the shop, knew that I'm meeting with you. Elizabeth closed her eyes, immediately understanding. My father. They didn't identify themselves, but they left a very clear message. Said that you deserve someone of your social standing, that I should step away before causing problems for myself. Ryan, I didn't know. They also made it clear that they know everything about me, about my financial situation, about the loans I took to keep the shop running after my father's death, about every aspect of my life. The shame that Elizabeth felt was overwhelming. He had you investigated, I found out this morning and came here to tell you. Investigated, Ryan laughed without humor, as if I were a criminal. You're not a criminal. My father is controlling. He always has been. After my accident, it got worse. He thinks he needs to protect me from everything and everyone. And maybe he's right. Ryan's words hit her like a bucket of cold water. What are you saying? He turned to face her, and she saw something in his eyes that she had never seen before, doubt. I'm saying that maybe we're from very different worlds. You're the CEO of a multi-million-dollar company. I fix old cars. You frequent elegant restaurants. I eat at Mrs. Johnson's bakery. You have responsibilities that I can't even imagine. None of that matters. Not to me. But it matters to the world around us, to your family, your shareholders, your reputation. Since when do you care about my reputation? Since I found out that it can affect hundreds of jobs, millions in investments, research that can save lives. Ryan sat back down but kept his distance. These men made me understand that my presence in your life can have consequences that go far beyond the two of us. Elizabeth leaned forward, trying to capture his gaze. Ryan, don't let them do this. Don't let my father destroy what we have. And what exactly do we have, Elizabeth? A few weeks of pleasant conversations? A few dinners in discreet places where no one knows us? The coldness in his voice frightened her. I thought we had something real. Something special. Real? He laughed again, a bitter sound that echoed through the small office. What's real about you hiding who you are? About me not knowing that I'm dating one of the most powerful women in the country? I wasn't hiding. I was just waiting for the right moment to tell you. And when would that moment be? After the wedding? The word wedding hung in the air between them, loaded with possibilities that now seemed unattainable. Elizabeth felt tears burning her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. You're being unfair, she said with a choked voice. Unfair? You know what's unfair? It's finding out that the woman you're starting to love has an entire life you know nothing about. It's realizing that you'll never be enough for her, no matter how hard you try. You are more than enough. You're the first person in years who makes me feel truly alive. But I'm not the right man for you. Your father made that very clear today. My father doesn't decide my life, doesn't he? Ryan stood up again, this time walking toward the door. Then why have you never taken me to meet your friends? Why have we never gone to a public event together? Why have all our meetings been in places where no one you know could see us? His questions were like arrows hitting targets she didn't want to admit existed. I was being cautious. You were being ashamed. Mark, that's not true. Now then prove it. Take me to dinner with your executive friends. Introduce me at your company's next social meeting. Show the world that Ryan Santos, the mechanic, is important to Elizabeth Norton, the CEO. His challenge left her without a response, not because she didn't want to do those things, but because she knew of the complications that would come. The questions, the looks, the malicious comments, the media pressure. Her silence was answer enough for Ryan. That's what I thought, he said, opening the door. Maybe it's better to end this here before someone gets really hurt. Ryan, please. Goodbye, Elizabeth. Take care. She wanted to protest, wanted to run after him, wanted to scream that he was wrong, that she loved him exactly as he was. But the words didn't come out. She stayed there alone in the small and simple office, surrounded by the smells of oil and metal that now seemed hauntingly familiar. In the days that followed, Elizabeth tried to make contact several times. She sent messages that weren't answered, called numbers that went straight to voicemail, passed by the shop at different times, only to discover that Ryan had asked employees to say he wasn't there. A week after the conversation at the shop, she received a short and formal message. Met someone else. You deserve better. The coldness of those words was worse than any fight, any discussion. It was the kind of message one sends to end an unimportant relationship, not to end something that, at least for her, had become fundamental. Elizabeth closed herself even more into work, diving into meetings and projects with an intensity that worried even Maria. She avoided passing by Riverside, changed her usual routes through the city, deleted Ryan's number from her phone in a desperate attempt not to succumb to the temptation of seeking him out. But the nights were the worst. Alone in the penthouse, with a view of a city that suddenly seemed smaller and less interesting, she relived every moment they had spent together. Every conversation, every smile, every casual touch that had made her heart race. It was Maria who, 2 weeks after Ryan's disappearance, found Elizabeth crying in the office after hours. Beth, you can't continue like this. I'm not like this. I'm fine. You're awful. You don't eat, don't sleep, barely talk to anyone. Did this man affect you that much? Elizabeth wiped away tears with her blazer sleeve. He made me remember who I was before becoming just the CEO, before becoming just the woman in the wheelchair. With him, I was simply Elizabeth. And can't you be simply Elizabeth again? How? He made it clear that he doesn't want anything more to do with me. He met someone else. Do you believe that? I have to believe it. It's what he said. Maria sat on the edge of the desk studying her friend's face. You know what? I'm going to investigate on my own. Maria, I'm not going to hire detectives or anything dramatic like that. But I'm going to find out what really happened. Men in love don't disappear overnight without a very good reason. And if the reason is that he simply realized he doesn't love me, then you'll have to accept it. But what if it's not? The question echoed in Elizabeth's mind for the rest of the week. What if it's not? What if there was more to it than just the conversation at the shop? What if her father had done more than just have Ryan investigated? The answer would come in a way she could never have predicted. On a rainy afternoon that would change everything once again. Heavy rain was falling over Portland that Friday afternoon, turning the streets into turbulent rivers and forcing pedestrians to take refuge under marquees and in shops. Elizabeth had left the office early, not because she had finished the day's commitments, but because she couldn't concentrate on anything anymore. 3 weeks had passed since the last conversation with Ryan, and the pain of his absence had transformed into a dull constant that accompanied her at every moment. Not even work, which had always been her refuge, could fill the void he had left. She decided to walk aimlessly through Rose Street, letting the rain wash away the tears that insisted on falling. It was when she was trying to cross a narrow street in the historic center that the accident almost happened. The wheelchair wheels got stuck in a deep crack in the sidewalk, wet and slippery. A car turned the corner faster than it should have, the driver clearly having difficulty seeing through the fogged windshield. The sound of the horn echoed loudly, mixed with the desperate shout of the driver trying to brake. Elizabeth closed her eyes, preparing for the impact that seemed inevitable. But instead of cold metal and pain, she felt strong arms lifting her from the wheelchair in a quick and safe movement. When she opened her eyes, she was in Ryan's arms, both soaked by the rain, both trembling, she from fright, he from something that seemed much more complex than just physical effort. Are you okay? Are you hurt? His voice was hoarse, desperate, completely different from the cold tone he had used in the last conversation. Elizabeth couldn't respond immediately. The shock of seeing him there, of being in his arms again, of realizing that he had appeared exactly when she needed him most, left her speechless. Beth, talk to me. Are you okay? The genuine concern in his voice, the way he called her by the nickname that only close people used, broke all the barriers she had built in recent weeks. Ryan. What are you doing here? He hesitated, carefully placing her back in the wheelchair. I was following you. Following? For a week. Every day I stay outside your company, waiting for you to leave. I don't know why. I don't know what I was expecting to happen. The rain continued to fall heavily on them, but neither moved toward shelter. It was as if that moment of mutual vulnerability couldn't be interrupted by anything as mundane as physical discomfort. Why did you disappear? The question left Elizabeth's mouth before she could filter the pain in her voice. Ryan ran his wet hands through his hair, a gesture she had learned to recognize when he was nervous. Because I was a coward. Because I was afraid. Afraid of what? Of not being enough for you. Of ruining your life. Of being just another mistake you would make because you were feeling alone. And the other person? You said you had met someone else. Ryan's eyes filled with something that took her a moment to recognize shame. I lied. There's no one. There never was. I thought it would be easier for you to forget me if you believed I had moved on. Easier? Her voice rose a few tones, mixing anger and relief in a proportion she herself couldn't distinguish. You thought it would be easier for me to think that you had replaced me in a matter of days. I was confused, hurt. Those men your father sent you, what exactly did they do? Ryan looked around, noticing for the first time that they were in the middle of the street, completely soaked, being observed by some passers-by taking shelter in nearby marquees. Let's talk somewhere dry, he said, pushing her chair toward a cafe that remained open a few meters ahead. Central Cafe was one of the oldest establishments in Portland's historic center, with dark wooden tables and a permanent aroma of roasted beans that created a welcoming atmosphere. They settled at a table in the back, away from the curiosity of other customers. Ryan ordered 2 hot coffees and, while they waited to be served, began to tell what had really happened. They didn't come just once, he said, nervously fiddling with the napkin on the table. They came back the day after our conversation at the shop, and the next day too. What did they want? On the first day it was just intimidation. They talked about social incompatibility, about me being interested only in your money, about how my presence in your life could damage your reputation. And you believed that? Not completely, but they planted a seed of doubt that I couldn't ignore. The waiter brought the coffees and Ryan thanked him with a nod before continuing. On the second day, the approach was different. They brought documents. What kind of documents? Loan contracts for the shop. Information about debts I took on when my father got sick. Data about the financial situation of the business. About how it's close to bankruptcy if I don't manage to pay off the loans in the coming months. Elizabeth felt her blood freeze. Were they threatening you financially? Worse than that. They were offering me a solution. What do you mean? Enough money to pay off all the debts and still have enough left to modernize the shop. All this in exchange for me disappearing from your life definitively. The revelation hit Elizabeth like a punch to the stomach. My father tried to buy you off, and I almost accepted. Almost? I spent the whole night thinking. The shop was all that remained of my father. Losing it would be like losing him again. But accepting the money would be like selling my dignity, would be admitting they were right about me being opportunistic. What did you do? On the third day, when they returned expecting an answer, I said no. I said I preferred to lose everything than accept dirty money. And they accepted that just fine? Ryan laughed without humor. Of course not. That's when things got really serious. Elizabeth leaned forward, sensing that the worst was yet to come. They made it clear that, if I didn't accept their offer voluntarily, they would find other ways to keep me away from you. They talked about unexpected inspections at the shop, about problems with documentation, about how easy it was to make the life of a small businessman impossible. They openly threatened you. Not with direct words, but the message was clear. Accept the money and disappear or prepare to have your life destroyed. Elizabeth closed her eyes, feeling a mixture of anger and disgust at her father's behavior. And you decided to disappear without telling me any of this. I thought it would be better that way. If I told you about the threats, you would confront your father, and that could cause problems in your family and your company. I thought it was simpler to pretend I had lost interest. Simpler. Her voice trembled with contained emotion. Ryan, you have no idea what these days without you have done to Mater, and you have no idea what it was like for me to pretend I didn't care anymore when all I wanted was to run to you and tell the truth. They sat in silence for a few minutes, each processing the revelations. The coffee grew cold in their cups as outside the rain began to diminish. What do we do now? Ryan finally asked. Now I'm going to have a very serious conversation with my father, and you're going to give me a second chance to prove that we are stronger than any external interference. Beth, no, this time it's different. This time I won't let fear or shame prevent me from fighting for what I want. She extended her hand across the table, covering his. And I want you, Ryan, I want us. I don't care what the world will think, I don't care if they'll say we're incompatible. Some things are worth fighting for. And if your father tries to fulfill his threats, then he'll discover that the daughter he raised is more stubborn and determined than he imagines. Ryan turned his hand so that their palms touched, intertwining his fingers with hers. I love you, Elizabeth. I should have said this before, should have fought for us from the beginning. You're saying it now. That's what matters. 2 hours later, they were in Albert Norton's office at Biogenesis headquarters. The older man received them with the controlled expression of someone who was already expecting that visit. But Elizabeth could notice the surprise in his eyes when he saw Ryan at her side. Dad, we need to talk about the threats you made to Ryan. I don't know what you're talking about. Don't lie to me. I know about the men you sent, about the money offers, about the intimidation. Albert leaned back in his chair, assuming the defensive posture he used when he felt cornered. All I did was try to protect you from an opportunist. Ryan is not an opportunist, and I don't need your protection to make my own decisions. You don't understand the implications. I understand perfectly. Elizabeth's voice was firm, carrying an authority she rarely used with her father. I understand that you're willing to destroy the life of an innocent man to maintain control over my life. I understand that you prefer to see me alone and unhappy than accept that I can find happiness with someone who doesn't fit your standards. Elizabeth, I'm not finished. She leaned forward. Let me make one thing very clear, Dad. You can try to intimidate Ryan. You can send inspectors to his shop. You can use all your contacts to make his life difficult. But if you do that, you'll lose your daughter definitively. You wouldn't do that. Don't test me. I've already lost 5 years of my life hiding behind fear. I won't lose another day because of your obsessive control. Albert looked at Ryan, who had remained silent throughout the conversation. And you? Don't you have anything to say? I do, replied Ryan, standing up from his chair. I have to say that I love your daughter, not for the money, not for the social position, but for the amazing woman she is. And I have to say that I will always care for her and respect her, regardless of your approval. You can't offer her the future she deserves. I can offer true love, respect, companionship. And apparently that's more than she has received from her own family. The tension in the office was palpable. Albert stared at the two of them for a long moment, clearly calculating his options. Finally, he sighed heavily. If you are determined to make this mistake— It's not a mistake, interrupted Elizabeth. It's a choice. 3 months later, on a sunny afternoon in the small yard behind Ryan's repair shop, Elizabeth celebrated something she never imagined experiencing: complete emotional freedom. Among plant pots she herself had chosen, simple lights hung between trees that Ryan had installed, and the smell of homemade food that the entire neighborhood had helped prepare. She wore a simple white dress and the lightest look she'd had in years. It wasn't a grand ceremony like the ones she had seen her whole life. It was small, intimate, real. Amanda, Ryan's sister, had become her best friend and maid of honor. Maria cried with emotion in the first row of improvised chairs. Mrs. Johnson from the bakery had made the wedding cake, insisting that she wouldn't accept payment. And Albert? He was there too, still uncomfortable with the simplicity of the environment, but present. It had taken months for him to accept that his daughter was genuinely happy. But when he finally understood that Ryan truly loved her, his resistance began to fade. When the justice of the peace asked if she accepted Ryan as her husband, Elizabeth didn't hesitate for even a fraction of a second. I do, she said, looking into the eyes of the man who had taught her that true love doesn't need external approval to exist. And when Ryan kissed her, sealing not just a marriage, but also the promise that some loves are strong enough to overcome any obstacle, Elizabeth knew that she had finally found her place in the world. Not as CEO, not as the woman in the wheelchair, not as Albert Norton's daughter, but as Elizabeth, simply Elizabeth, loved exactly as she was by someone who had chosen to stay not out of pity or interest, but out of true love. 6 months after the wedding, she still wakes up every day next to the man who entered her life in an unexpected way and taught her that sometimes the happiest endings begin in the most unlikely moments. Ryan's repair shop prospered, not just financially but as a community gathering point. Elizabeth discovered that she could be a CEO and a mechanic's wife at the same time, that she could lead a multi-million-dollar company during the day and help fix cars on weekends. And every night, when they lie down together in the simple house they bought near the